The art of being sick. Just to get this video started, I want to read a journal entry that I wrote back in January 6th, 2025, when I faced an event where I thought I was going to literally die. Let me pull up my journal right now. I leaned on the handle of the toilet balcony door, bent my head and body, started puking everywhere around the toilet bowl. Made a horrible mess of Indian food puke in the toilet bowl, which made me never want to eat Indian food again. Literally the worst taste of vomit you can think of. The puke was no ordinary puke. Every time, you can feel that there is air in your stomach before you start puking. And when you puke, you feel like your whole organ is about to break because of the air included with the puke. I don't know how I survived that. There were a couple of times when I thought I was seriously going to die because that shit was like an animal trying to come up of your small throat. That was just a small paragraph describing the vomit that I had, and I remember just some context. It was after eating some food with my dad in like a restaurant. I just went back home. I felt very full, but then somehow I just started vomiting because it was like overloading. And of course, I understand that so many people out there experience way worse things, but this was for me one of the most contemplative experience that I've experienced really recently, like over the past couple of years. And something very interesting is how the brain handles like near-death experiences or extremely painful situations. And one thing I constantly notice is that my brain starts to ask a lot of what-if questions. What if I die? What if I don't make it? What if this happens? What if that happens? And another thing I remember was that I thought I did something wrong, which caused that sickness and caused that vomit to happen. So then I started becoming really guilty of myself. I began whispering apologies and begging God to forgive me like nonstop in my head. And what I want to talk about today is an alternative approach with facing difficult times like these, because normally what most people do when they face these situations, or maybe just in general disease or sickness, is depending on the extremes, they would try to always find a quick fix solution, right? Like buying medical drugs or consulting a doctor to feel mentally better and physically better, and just to tell ourselves that we're okay. And really there was nothing wrong with that, because that time what ended up happening was that I went to see the doctor after 2 hours of nonstop barfing, because that's just our human instincts. We always want security, right? Our body is programmed to survive. That's the number one foundation inside of us. And there's also this mechanism called homeostasis within our body, which just basically means that our body will always want to maintain that balanced and stable environment internally, so then we can properly function and our muscles can properly move and we can just operate as a system in general. But then the problem comes right after people face these sicknesses, because what you'll observe is that most of the time you'll either have one or two of these approaches, which is, number one, you'll either have a reactive approach where after the sickness we start blaming people or external circumstances for causing this disease in whatever way. So for example, like let's just say you got sick in school, and then your parents, if you're living with them, they're gonna be like, oh, who actually caused the sickness to you? Or who's the sick people? They must assume that there's a lot of virus are going around the school. Maybe you ate something wrong, right? They start blaming these external circumstances. And on the other hand, you have also the repressed attitude, which is that we instantly try to forget about the disease because of the painful experience. And I mean, who wants to remember these painful things when in life it's all about living joy, right? And finding these happy moments, and that's normally the memories that we recap whenever we talk to people, right? We try to hide away the pain and we only want to glorify ourselves. And when we try to suppress this pain, we just continue moving on with our mundane and usual lives, right? Treating that it's like something in the past. I mean, don't look back at it, or else the more you negatively manifest it, then the more you attract it into your life, right? And the above two approaches, if you really seriously think about it, it's really tied to some sort of fear. And we're trying to run away from the fear. But then, most likely, because we're running away from the fear, we're not figuring out what the root problem or the root causes are. And what ends up happening is that once these feelings or these disease comes back to our lives, then we just go over into the cycle of either being reactive and spreading this negative energy to others, or we just suppress it within ourselves. And this can, over time, bring up a lot of strong emotions when you are really keeping it inside of yourself. And what you'll start to notice is that this is really a victim mindset. And what the victim mindset is that you're thinking that the world put all of these responsibilities to you for no reason, and that you can't do anything about it. So then you just start complaining. But this is not true. Because in reality, you can actually do something about it. And the only reason why people are not doing anything about it is because they're too busy with their lives, or they're just not aware of what to do because we just don't have time, right? It looks like time is our greatest enemy, and we have to optimize every single second. Therefore, we shouldn't be caring about these small things and really just be grinding our lives out. So let me spend some time now to talk about how we can actually effectively face our sickness. And to begin with this, the most fundamental thing to do is when we're sick, we need to begin tuning into our bodies. And the only way to start listening to our body is by slowing down. And this really is paradoxical to the entire world right now, because we start seeing every single news, wars are going on, right? Fast-paced action is happening everywhere, right? People are fearful that AI agents are going to replace us. Right? Have you watched on the news? Elon Musk is announcing different types of models that can literally do basic work. So then many people are fearing that their lives are in trouble, right? They won't have anything to do. And then in these situations, what we need to do is really start slowing down, listening to our body, because what you start to realize is that your body will tell you many wisdoms and guide you to do the right things if you actually just listen to it. But then because we suppress it so much, that's why the voice is so quiet. But then we'll talk about that in another video. So going back to the body and talking about sickness, instead of escaping reality, which is something that we love to do by scrolling social media, watching Netflix, trying to trick our minds to relax more because we think that in sickness, it's a signal from our body that we're overworking too much, or we got to release the stress some way. What we need to do is we need to start pausing and just pay attention to which area of our body is hurting. So for example, going back to the basic approaches, when you get a stomach ache, right? What do we instantly think of? We instantly think that we're eating something wrong, right? But then most of us, we stop in that level. We got to go even further to that. Is there anything else that can show us that we're misaligned in life? Or rather than just thinking that it's a stomach ache because we're eating the wrong food, maybe it's telling us something else. Or have you ever thought of why sometimes you would get sick in the most random periods of times? Like literally you ate the right food every single day and you ate that food like for weeks, but then you're still getting that stomach ache, and it was like a really sudden stomach ache. You thought you're going to be healthy, but then the other day you wake up in the morning and it's like you suddenly have a stomach ache. Right? There must be something deeper going on there. So speaking about this concept, I want to introduce the approach called holistic thinking. And holistic thinking just simply means understanding that there are multiple different perspectives and different routes to a certain idea, which are small parts of an interconnected whole, which you'll see. And to really explain what holistic thinking means and how it applies to sickness, let me just take an example of a business. For example, if you look at any businesses that you like any brands that you're wearing, like you could even take your computer right now, if you're using like a Windows computer or if you're using an Apple computer, how these companies operate is that they have different departments, right? They have the human resource department, the finance department, the marketing department, the operations department, and they all have their own unique aspects and they play an important role in running a functional business. That really is the basics of if you're going to study business or if you've studied business before. And what ends up happening is that if one of these departments crashes, then the other one will be impacted. So if we're using this logic, for example, when we make decisions, we actually need to think about not only one part, but then also different parts of these businesses. So going back to the sickness itself, let's just say your stomach is aching, right? Rather than just thinking about the stomach department, the digestive system being affected, we can also think about how other parts are feeling, right? Rather than just focusing on one part. And this also comes down to checking in with yourself in other areas of your life, because sometimes the causes may not be direct and you may have to do a bit of digging to kind of figure out what it's trying to tell you, because ultimately the body is just like a guide, is trying to give you like a map onto that there's something misaligned with your life. That's why you're causing some kind of sickness. So if you start looking physically, right, or mentally, or emotionally, or spiritually, and you just really contemplate all four of these aspects together in a really like integrated manner, then at least you'll be able to pinpoint another possible area of these disease that's happening, right? Disease, again, if you break down the word, one part is dis and the other part is ease. So it means that there's something in your life that is making you out of this ease mode. So then what we need to do is really find that part and really holistically contemplate on what it might be. And another common example with holistic thinking is nature itself. If we just look around us into any sort of ecosystem, let's just take Antarctica as an example. And with climate change, people are saying that the ices are melting, and we can see that not only polar bears are suffering from their habitats because the ice is melting and they can't really swim and they have less land, but we got to think more holistically, and we start to realize that it's also increasing sea levels, which has a risk of bringing tsunamis. So then that also impacts humans. And how else does it impact humans? It also impacts humans by, with the increased sea level, we can absorb more heat into the ocean. This is basic science. Then they'll be affecting the marine ecosystem. And with less marine creatures, then fishermen, for example, may be out of jobs because they don't have, fishes to provide, right? And then if there's no fish, then that impacts another ecosystem, right? It impacts, for example, like the coral reefs itself, because the fish and the coral reefs mutually benefit from each other. So then you can just go on and on and on and think about different implications. And then after that, you'll start to realize how interconnected everything is, right? Our lives are all just interconnected. So we just need to balance looking at different views, right? And open up more imagination and more areas that we can contemplate on, so then we can start figuring out why problems come rather than just relying on one direct source. So again, going back to the whole concept of how we can holistically think about sickness, rather than just blindly listening to our doctors and taking their advice as the end-all be-all advice and you should only follow that, we start thinking more holistically, checking into the different departments, right? Where mentally may we be out of a line right now? Or maybe it might be work, it might be relationships, it might be, I don't know, like hobbies, or it might be spiritually. And where maybe physically are we out of a line right now? Maybe we're not doing enough exercise, or maybe we are not taking care of our nutrition. That's another aspect to contemplate. And then emotionally, where are we out of a line? Right? Maybe we're not pursuing our life purpose deep enough, or maybe we're going into the wrong direction. Right? And all of this comes through journaling and contemplating. And it comes through the art of slowing down and just being more aware. So what you begin to see is that this whole work of awakening is all interconnected, because once you awaken in one aspect, then another aspect will benefit from that, because we're all raising our consciousness, right? No matter which direction of awakening you pursue, what teachings or what maps you use, eventually we'll all end up in the same place where we are all exhibiting this higher quality that we all distinctly have. Right? That's going to be the similarity among us, which is we're all acting from our conscious self, but then we're also distinct in a way where we all have our own unique geniuses and unique talents. There's a really insightful book which I've read lately called The Art of Contemplation, written by Richard Rudd, where he teaches us how to actually slow down, specifically in moments of illnesses, and how to actually contemplate that. So I just want to spend a moment to read a paragraph where he talks about how we should face illness, right? The slowing down way of facing illness, right? Compared to the rushing and the quick fix way. So illness is a natural part of life. There are many forms of illness, but all forms offer an opening into the contemplative state. Illness drives us deeper into the consciousness of our body through the discomfort and pain that we are forced to confront. Illness tends to remind us of our mortality, so our contemplation might naturally swing in a direction of the subject of death. We do not generally know how we will die, but there is a chance that it may involve some physical pain, and it will definitely involve the dissolution of our detachment to the body. Illness is therefore to be trusted at the very deep level. Whether we surrender to our illness or we fight it, it invites us to contemplate our own death and to open our hearts to embrace the great mystery of life and death. To try to view illness as an opportunity. Try to view illness as an opportunity to let go of some of the deep fears held in your body and trust that it will deliver you its own unique teaching. This is also the case when you're attending another who is ill. Taking care of another who is ill comes with all of its own challenges and teachings. It is a great opportunity to demonstrate the endless patience and kindness of the contemplative state. Above all, it is also a reminder to be kind and compassionate towards yourself. Just take a moment and let that paragraph or let some of the sentences sink in and see what really resonates with you a lot. For me, it's when Richard talks about the subject of death, right? Death contemplation itself. And death contemplation really can be scary in the beginning. It can be really fearful because we start thinking that we have to rush a lot of things in life because we haven't achieved many things that we want to achieve. But then once we actually start slowing down and listing out the things that we want to achieve, we start to realize that more than 80% of the things that we want to achieve are externally tied, and it's not something that we want to internally have. So then what we do is, once we identify that we're aware of it, then we focus on the things that we actually internally want to align ourselves towards. And what I've realized after swinging from both spectrums of slowing down and also rushing whenever I think about death contemplation is it all goes down to finding the balance, or finding what comes naturally to you. And again, that may sound pretty abstract, pretty generic, but it's important to go to both ends of the spectrum, because only through experiencing it yourself, then can you find wisdoms. Or a lot of these teachings is like the best teacher is yourself, gaining direct experience. Like a lot of these wisdoms all come from that. And another area that resonated with me is, what is contemplation? Contemplation is solely just creating stillness in our lives. And stillness can be done in many different forms. Like, it doesn't have to be physically still. Like, you don't have to like meditate, but obviously that's the most direct way you can get it. But you can also create stillness in different activities that you're doing, as long as you're just being present. Contemplation is being present, and normally you'll have something to contemplate on. For example, if you have an urgent question on why you got this illness or why you're facing this problem, then you can contemplate on it. And just by thinking about it throughout the day, or not really thinking about it every single minute, but progressively thinking about it, you start to be more aware of your environment and seeing whether or not you can identify any answers. And there's a term for that called synchronicities, where once you start to think about something, then suddenly it appears in your life as an answer for some reason. Like, have you ever got that feeling before where, like, let's just say you lost your glasses, right? And during that moment, you're panicking because you really need your reading glasses. But then over time, you get on with life. But then suddenly there's like a download of answer that came, and you were like, oh, I left my glasses in this place. And then you just go to that place and you realize your glasses are there. And for no reason, scientifically, right? For no reason can you expect these random moments to happen. And that's really the magic and really the beauty of life, when you start to slow down and observe the universe being the friend of you. Even though no matter what disease and what problem they give you, they're trying to teach you something. There's a reason why you're going through this. Is it to learn some kind of wisdom or insight for your life? Or is it some kind of symptom, right? Symptom of another problem that you're neglecting or that you're facing? Or is it telling you to create something bigger out of it? Right? I have huge respect to one of my friends where we collaborated on a project on building an AI to help detect his scoliosis disease, because he was diagnosed with it. And it was really unfortunate because it was a really late diagnosis as well, and he couldn't play basketball for quite a while. And instead of victimizing himself, we decided to create a project together, right? So that we can help others solve this problem. And that really is when we start reaching the higher states, when we start creating, when we start interconnecting, when we start helping others, rather than focusing on ourselves, focusing on how we're the victims of the world, and focusing on all of these negative beliefs that we have. And this really is how we transform all of the shadows to the beauty that we have in this world. And ultimately, to live a fulfilled life, one of the most beautiful ways is when you start to understand the feeling and it feels really personalized to you. Right? You understand what your body is saying, where you're out of aligned, and you develop this beautiful trust with yourself and also the universe. Ultimately, through turning the unconscious areas of your life to a level where you're more conscious and more aware of it. And even though at times it's going to be hard to pinpoint it to language, at least you can feel it. And that's what people call knowing, right? You know that sensation. You actually know something because you can feel it. And even though you may not be able to describe it to someone else, that doesn't matter, because these are internal wisdoms that are personalized to you, and everyone faces different things. But once you share it, then other people may also have similar experiences, and really that's the beauty of seeing how the world on one hand is interconnected and on the other hand it's super distinct. And I just want to end this video with a quote by Carl Jung. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will control you and you will call it fate. Catch you guys in the next one.